It was a Sunday morning, and the day was radiant, with the sun shining brightly and birds singing joyfully in Sylvia's garden. The beauty of the morning seemed perfectly in sync with nature, creating a serene and tranquil atmosphere. Sylvia, a 40-year-old Black woman and police colonel, had the habit of waking up early due to her demanding routine, and that day, she woke up even before her alarm went off. Sitting on the porch, she sipped her coffee and smoked a cigarette, taking in the scenery around her. The smell of coffee blended with the fresh morning air, and the sound of the birds felt like a soft melody to her ears. Suddenly, her phone alarm went off, marking exactly 7 a.m. Sylvia, feeling a bit anxious, tried to turn off the alarm, but the stress and anxiety from work had caused her to wake up earlier than expected. Her job as a colonel was demanding, with constant phone calls, endless reports, meetings, and debates on public safety. She was eager to spend a relaxing day with her family, little Mia, her 8-year-old daughter, and her mother, Margaret, who lived with her. She got up from the porch and went to wake up her mother, Margaret, who was startled by Sylvia's wake-up call. The young colonel, with a tense smile, asked, "What's wrong, Mom? Were you dreaming?" She let out a nervous laugh. Then Sylvia went to wake up Mia, who was already crying. She picked up her daughter and comforted her, asking, "What's wrong, sweetie?" "I had a nightmare. I dreamed I lost all my teeth, and the girls at school were laughing at me," Mia replied between sobs. Sylvia smiled and, with a loving tone, lifted Mia up before gently placing her on the floor. She said, "Honey, that's not going to happen. And besides, you're very beautiful and not going to lose your teeth." Sylvia, with a look of concern mixed with affection, instructed Mia, "Sweetie, go take a bath and brush your teeth because we'll be leaving soon." Margaret, who was in the living room, offered to help. "If you want, I can help you with Mia. You can go ahead and get ready." Sylvia, surprised, replied, "But Mom, aren't you going to get ready too?" Margaret laughed softly and said, "My dear, I'm of a certain age now. I'm not looking for a boyfriend anymore. You're the one who needs to find someone." Sylvia smiled, but her smile was a mix of sadness and resignation. "Yeah, Mom, I really should get out more." She brushed the thought aside with a sigh and said, "All right, Mom, I'll go get ready." She then headed upstairs to her bedroom to prepare. Sylvia had recently separated from Roberto, who worked at a famous radio station. They met when Roberto criticized public safety, and Sylvia, who was in charge of the area, decided to confront him at the radio station in person. The initial argument was intense, but somehow, Sylvia found herself attracted to Roberto. The issues with public safety were complex and required hard work, and Roberto eventually understood the situation. He invited her to dinner to discuss the topic further. That's how their relationship started. They dated, got married, and had a daughter named Mia. After 5 years of marriage, Sylvia discovered that Roberto was having an affair with an intern at the radio station, Camila. Sylvia caught him when she followed him to the station. The scene she witnessed was devastating, and in a fit of rage, Sylvia destroyed the radio studio, unable to harm the intern. After that trauma, she decided to separate and sent Roberto away. Aware of the gravity of his actions, Roberto moved to another city to try to hide his shame. Sylvia decided to start over, bringing her mother to live with her due to her old age and to be close to Mia. On that Sunday, Sylvia decided to go to the beach with her mother and daughter. 3 generations together, grandmother, mother, and daughter. They were getting ready for a relaxing day at the beach and, once ready, headed to Sylvia's car. As they left the house, driving on a busy street, Sylvia looked in the rearview mirror and noticed a police car speeding up, threatening to overtake her car. Sylvia, trying to avoid an accident, signaled to move to the side, but the police car moved in the same direction, almost causing a collision. Luckily, Sylvia managed to swerve in time. When she looked at the police car, she saw a female officer with an angry expression, driving furiously. The officer slammed her fist on the driver's door of the patrol car and yelled, "Are you blind? Can't you see the police car?" She then ordered Sylvia to pull over. There was a supermarket parking lot ahead, and Sylvia signaled to turn into it, aiming not to block traffic and to obey the officer's order. Her mother, frightened, asked, "What's wrong, Mom? What's happening?" Sylvia, trying to stay calm, replied, looking back, "It's nothing, sweetie. Mommy just needs to step out of the car and take care of something. Just stay here quietly." And turning to her mother, she said, "Stay here, Mom. I'll be right back." The officer, still shouting, approached and ordered, "Hey, ma'am, stop right there. Put your hands on the roof of the vehicle." Sylvia, bewildered, tried to understand the reason for the officer's behavior. The officer, growing more and more enraged, continued to shout, and the unexpected was about to happen. Sylvia, still with her heart racing, took a deep breath and, making an effort to stay calm, addressed the officer with a tense but controlled voice. "Officer, what is the reason for this stop?" "I have my mother and my 8-year-old daughter in the car." The female officer, her expression growing increasingly severe, seemed to have lost her emotional control. Her eyes flashed with anger as she began to hurl insults. "Of course, it had to be a black woman driving like this," the officer snapped, the contempt in her voice unmistakable. "Don't you know how to follow traffic rules?" Sylvia was deeply shocked by these words. The blatant injustice and prejudice struck a nerve, and anger and frustration began to bubble up inside her. Standing tall and radiating authority, Sylvia prepared to respond with the strength and control of a police colonel. "With all due respect, I'm just trying to understand the reason for this stop. I did nothing but try to avoid an accident and not disrupt traffic." The officer, still enraged, ignored Sylvia's plea and continued to shout, "Put your hands on the roof of the vehicle and stay still." Sylvia, now out of the car with her hands raised, maintained a firm and imposing stance. A high-ranking officer approached the scene, noticing Sylvia's resolute and authoritative posture. His concerned expression indicated that he recognized the gravity of the situation and the potential mistake of the officer. Sylvia, with a voice that commanded respect, addressed the officer. "I would like to go to the station to file a complaint about this stop." The officer, visibly alarmed upon realizing Sylvia's rank, asked, "Ma'am, do you know where the station is?" With a tone of irony and a firm gaze, Sylvia extended her arm to show her ID and replied, "Yes, I know where the station is. I'm a colonel." The officer, a lieutenant, was startled as he recognized the importance of a police colonel. He was clearly concerned about what the officer had done. "Would the colonel like an escort to the station?" the lieutenant asked, trying to ensure that everything was resolved as smoothly as possible. Sylvia, maintaining her firm demeanor, responded, "That won't be necessary. You've done your part here. Now, the officer who stopped me has committed abuse of power and racial discrimination." The officer, hearing Sylvia's words and realizing the seriousness of the situation, widened her eyes, worried about the severity of her actions. She approached Sylvia with a fearful expression and said, "Colonel, I apologize for what happened." Sylvia, with a stern look, replied, "Apology accepted, but you're also under arrest for abuse of power and racial slander." Sylvia then turned to the lieutenant and ordered, "Handcuff the officer and take her to the station. I'll follow shortly." With that, the lieutenant, visibly apprehensive, ordered one of the other officers to handcuff the officer and take her to the station. Sylvia, watching the scene with a sense of justice, got into her car, where her mother and daughter were waiting. "Let's go to the station," Sylvia said firmly. "We need to handle this properly." The car headed toward the station, and Sylvia felt a mix of relief and determination. The morning had started chaotically, but she was ready to face the situation with the authority and justice her position required. Sylvia drove with a determined expression, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The morning had turned into an unexpected whirlwind, and as the car moved toward the station, she couldn't shake the thought that this situation went beyond a simple traffic stop. Her daughter and mother sat silently in the back seat, the tension hanging in the air. When they arrived at the station, the place was buzzing with activity. Officers and staff were rushing back and forth, but the atmosphere was even more charged than usual. What Sylvia didn't yet know was that outside the building, a scene involving a traffic stop and a police colonel was gaining massive attention on social media. As soon as Sylvia parked and stepped out of the car, she was met with a barrage of journalists and reporters. Cameras and microphones were thrust toward her, and the sound of their questions was nearly deafening. "Colonel, what can you tell us about the arrest of the officer?" a reporter asked, trying to get closer. "Colonel, how do you feel knowing that the incident was filmed and is going viral on social media?" another journalist questioned, attempting to capture Sylvia's response on camera. With a stern and determined expression, Sylvia replied, "The way I was treated and the disrespect I endured are unacceptable. The officer has been arrested for abuse of authority and racial slander. The investigation will continue, and it's important that justice is served." Sylvia's words were recorded by several bystanders' cell phones in the area. The footage of the incident and the subsequent arrest of the officer had already spread widely on social media. Videos of the confrontation and the officer's arrest were being shared at an astonishing speed. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. The officer who had abused her authority sat in a separate room, visibly disturbed and looking distressed. She knew things had spiraled out of control and was worried about the impact this would have on her career and personal life. As Sylvia was being interviewed, the lieutenant who had helped escort the officer approached her with a serious expression. "Colonel, the situation is spreading rapidly. There are videos of the incident circulating on social media, and the press is covering every detail." Sylvia nodded, understanding the magnitude of the situation. "I was expecting this," she replied firmly. "We'll handle this with complete transparency. What's important now is to ensure that justice is done and that the racial slander complaint is taken with the seriousness it deserves." Amidst all the commotion, Margaret and Mia waited in the precinct's reception area, watching the chaos from a distance. Margaret tried to calm her granddaughter, who was restless and wide-eyed at the activity outside the station. "Sweetheart, stay calm," Margaret said, trying to soothe Mia. "Everything's going to be okay. Your mom is doing the right thing." Mia looked at her grandmother with uncertainty and asked, "Grandma, why is all this happening?" Margaret, with a calm and understanding expression, replied, "Sometimes things get complicated, but your mom is doing what's necessary to ensure people are treated with respect and fairness." Meanwhile, the tension in the interrogation room was mounting. The officer was now facing intense questioning about her actions. When Sylvia learned what was happening, she decided to follow the process closely to ensure everything was handled properly. "You know your actions were recorded and are being widely shared, right?" the lieutenant asked the officer gravely. With tears in her eyes and a look of despair, the officer replied, "Yes, I know. I made a serious mistake, and I'm ready to face the consequences." The situation was clearly at a critical point. The media continued to cover the case closely, and videos of the incident were being shared across the country. All eyes were on how the situation would be resolved and how Sylvia would manage the crisis. With her firm stance and determined gaze, Sylvia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face every challenge that came her way. What started as a simple traffic stop had turned into a case that would define how justice and accountability were viewed in her community. With reporters still surrounding her and the visible chaos, Sylvia took one last look at her mother and daughter before heading into the room where the officer was being interrogated. She was determined to ensure that justice prevailed and that everyone involved was held accountable for their actions. After Sylvia filed her complaint and the officer was formally detained, the tension in the station began to ease. What had initially seemed like a simple traffic stop had escalated into a fight for justice and dignity. The media was in a frenzy, capturing every detail and broadcasting the case in real time. The officer, now in custody, faced a grave situation. Her conduct had been widely publicized, and the public was divided, watching the case unfold with great interest. Once Sylvia ensured that everything was being handled with the seriousness it deserved, she made her way to the reception where her mother and daughter were waiting. Margaret and Mia were anxious and nervous, but Sylvia's presence brought a sense of relief. "Mom, are you okay?" Margaret asked as she saw Sylvia approaching. "I'm fine, Mom. I've taken care of everything here," Sylvia replied with a tone of firmness, but also fatigue. "Now we can head to the beach as planned." The thought of finally relaxing and spending some quality time with her daughter and mother was a relief for Sylvia. As soon as they left the station, they got into the car and headed toward the beach. The day was beautiful, with a clear sky and the sun shining brightly. It was the kind of day that promised to be perfect for a seaside outing. Arriving at the beach, Sylvia allowed herself to relax a little. The sound of the waves gently crashing on the sand and the cool sea breeze were exactly what she needed to unwind. Mia ran to the water, while Margaret settled into a beach chair, watching her granddaughter with a smile on her face. Sylvia took the opportunity to walk along the shore, reflecting on what had happened. The emotional impact of the day was deep, but being with her family and enjoying a peaceful day helped ease the tension. It was a reminder that, despite the challenges, there were moments of tranquility and beauty to be appreciated. As the day progressed, the case gained even more attention on social media. The video of the police interaction and Sylvia's reaction went viral. The situation was widely discussed and public reaction was mixed. Many supported Sylvia, highlighting the importance of fighting against prejudice and injustice, while others criticized how the situation was handled. Over time, the impact of the case began to spread beyond social media. Sylvia started receiving invitations for lectures and interviews. She was invited to participate in a well-known podcast, where she had the opportunity to share her experience and discuss broader issues of racial prejudice and the role of women in society. On the podcast, Sylvia spoke eloquently and sincerely about the incident. She explained that, despite her initial reaction, she had no intention of harming the officer. She was, in fact, trying to deal with a situation that, on a very personal level, touched directly on issues of respect and dignity. On the day of the incident, I really didn't want to cause more problems than there already were. But the officer made an extremely offensive comment, saying something like, "Only a black person would make that kind of traffic mistake." That kind of prejudice is something we cannot accept, especially when it comes from people who are supposed to uphold order and justice, Sylvia said on the podcast. "I know the situation could have been handled differently, but the reality is that this approach was marked by deep disrespect. And I can't let that become normal. If we allow attitudes like this to become common, tomorrow it could be my mother or my daughter going through the same thing." Sylvia's words resonated deeply with the audience. Her courage and the way she addressed the issue of racial prejudice and the importance of dignity in treating everyone were widely praised. Her story inspired many to reflect on issues of justice and respect, and her experience became a powerful example of how to face and overcome adversity. In the end, Sylvia managed to find a balance between her personal and professional life. She continued her work as a colonel with dedication and engaged in important causes. Her case served as a reminder that, even in the face of difficulties and injustices, it is possible to fight for a more just and equal world. The day at the beach was a welcome break from a tumultuous week, and Sylvia knew that despite the challenges, true strength came from standing firm in her values and fighting for what is right. The experience strengthened her and motivated her to continue her work, not only as a leader in the police force, but also as an advocate for human rights and social justice. This chapter concludes the sequence on Sylvia's case, highlighting the impact the event had on her life and the role it played in creating a broader dialogue about issues of justice and prejudice. If you need more details or adjustments, I'll be here to help. The case of Sylvia, the colonel who faced racial prejudice, became a topic of discussion nationwide. Social media was flooded with heated debates about the police interaction and the subsequent reactions. While most of Sylvia's supporters were those who had faced racism or deeply understood the issue, a significant portion of the public, mainly those who had not lived through such realities, were divided. Many viewed Sylvia's reaction as exaggerated and unnecessary, sparking intense online debate. Public opinion became a battleground of emotions and opposing viewpoints. The perspective of those who had not experienced prejudice often failed to take into account the personal and psychological impact of such incidents. However, the support for Sylvia was not limited to public debate. Roberto, Sylvia's ex-husband and Mia's father, saw an opportunity to get involved and support his ex-wife. He decided to use his platform on the radio to talk about the importance of Sylvia's stance and the need to confront racial prejudice. On his show, Roberto approached the topic with empathy and understanding, emphasizing Sylvia's difficulty in dealing with a situation fraught with racism and underscoring that her reaction was a response to both a personal and institutional attack. He stressed the importance of understanding the experiences of those who face discrimination, arguing that the reactions of victims often seem exaggerated to those who haven't endured the same kind of suffering. Listen, folks, it's crucial to understand that what happened to Sylvia wasn't just a matter of a traffic dispute. It was the manifestation of something much deeper, a deeply rooted prejudice that needs to be challenged. Her reaction, though strong, was a reflection of the pain and frustration accumulated from facing similar situations throughout her life, Roberto explained on his show. Roberto's approach began to make a difference. Public support for Sylvia started to grow again, and the narrative on social media began to shift. Admiration for Sylvia was renewed, and many people started to see the case from a new perspective. Over time, Roberto and Sylvia found a way to reconnect. The tension that had arisen between them in the past was softened by mutual understanding and respect for each other's struggles. Roberto began to visit Sylvia more often, and conversations about their daughter Mia and the impact of the recent incident brought a new perspective to their relationship. Seeing Roberto's genuine effort to support and defend her publicly, Sylvia began to reconsider her feelings for him. The admiration and gratitude she felt for his support made her look at him with fresh eyes. The process of reconciliation was gradual, but it started to solidify through small yet meaningful gestures. The decision to rekindle the relationship wasn't easy for Sylvia. She knew she would need to balance her personal feelings with the need to protect her daughter and ensure that all changes were positive for the family. However, the happiness she observed in Mia and Roberto's willingness to reconcile were strong motivators. Finally, the news of Roberto returning to Sylvia's life was met with great enthusiasm. Margaret, Sylvia's mother, although she had been reserved about Roberto in the past, was visibly excited about the news. She had always wanted the best for her daughter, and seeing Sylvia and Mia's happiness reflected on their faces brought a smile to her own. "I'm so happy to see you two back together," Margaret said, with tears in her eyes. "I always knew that when it comes to family, what matters most is the love and support we give each other. If you're happy, then I'm happy too." Mia, who was jumping and making a mess on the couch, could hardly contain her joy at seeing her parents together again. The joyful chaos in the living room was a reminder of how much Roberto's presence meant to her. She ran back and forth, hugging her parents and excitedly asking questions about what their future would look like. Roberto's return brought new energy into Sylvia's home. Conversations about daily life, future plans, and simple moments of joy helped rebuild the relationship and create new happy memories. Sylvia, now with a fresh perspective on what truly mattered in her life, continued to dedicate herself to her work with a renewed sense of purpose and balance. Sylvia's case and the turnaround in her personal life served as a reminder that despite adversity, life offers opportunities for growth, reconciliation, and love. Sylvia's family found new harmony and a fresh start, and her story became an example of how to face challenges and find strength in the relationships that truly matter.